Stalag Luft III, January 1945. A group of emaciated American officers, surviving on thin German kohlrabi stew and black bread, finally received the delayed sacred white boxes marked with the Red Cross. With frostbitten fingers, they carefully opened one. According to POW memoirs like those from Arthur Durand's history, what emerged was a vision from a vanished world. They unpacked tinned Spam, dense chocolate bars, real ground coffee, packs of Chesterfield cigarettes, processed cheese, dried prunes, and in some parcels, small boxes of Kellogg's cornflakes. The shock was total, followed by a stunned silence. This was not mere sustenance. It was a physical fragment of American plenty, untouched by the war raging outside the wire. The contrast was apocalyptic. While the German guards and the surrounding civilian population were starving on a diet of turnips, ersatz, coffee, and sawdust-stretched bread, their supply lines shattered by Allied bombing, the prisoners now held items that had been unobtainable luxuries in Germany for years. A single Red Cross parcel packed over 4,500 calories, a lifeline of unimaginable wealth. The cognitive dissonance was catastrophic for Nazi ideology. For years, propaganda had derided Americans as weak and decadently obsessed with material luxury. Now, that very luxury, delivered by a neutral humanitarian organization, was the only thing standing between the prisoners and starvation. The parcel was a compact, undeniable refutation of everything the captors had been told. But how did these boxes of American plenty become the ultimate psychological weapon in the final days of the Third Reich? And what did their contents reveal about the two collapsing worlds inside and outside the barbed wire? To understand the shattering impact of that moment, Red Cross inspection reports and prisoner diaries show we must first descend into the documented. A desperate reality of the POW camps in the winter of 1944. By the winter of 1944, the German policy was one of documented systematic starvation. Official Wehrmacht directives, as cited by historian Vasilis Vorkausiotis, steadily reduced ration scales for prisoners of war, placing them at the absolute bottom of the Reich's collapsing food chain. The official allocation for a non-working Allied POW was a skeletal 1,450 calories per day. A starvation diet composed of watery soup, a few ounces of black bread, adulterated with sawdust or potato peelings, and the ubiquitous, despised turnip. In practice, even this meager ration often failed to arrive. International Red Cross medical inspectors filed grim clinical reports. From Stalag 7A in December 1944, the caloric intake is grossly insufficient. We observe severe emaciation, widespread edema from protein deficiency, and a marked increase in pellagra and dysentery. The average weight loss among prisoners is estimated at 25 kilograms. Prisoners were shadows, losing 40 to 60 pounds, their bodies consuming themselves. This was not mere neglect, it was a deliberate calculation. German resources were reserved for the Volk and the frontline soldier. The guards themselves, often elderly Landeschützen or teenage Volkssturm, were also hungry and resentful, subsisting on barely better fare. Nazi propaganda had long framed Allied abundance as a sign of moral decay and softness. The very concept of a Red Cross parcel, a box of concentrated high-quality food, was viewed through this lens as the epitome of enemy decadence, a frivolity in a time of total war where the only true virtue was endurance. The Germans saw the prisoners' suffering as an inevitable, even justified, consequence of their defeat in the Allied blockade. They believed their own ideological hardness would outlast the material comfort of their enemies. As starvation set in behind the wire, declassified Red Cross logistics cables reveal a monumental transatlantic effort was fighting to keep prisoners alive, an effort the Germans dismissed as typical Allied extravagance. The American challenge was a logistical puzzle of breathtaking scale and complexity. Conducting a global humanitarian operation in the middle of total war, the American Red Cross, backed by the U.S. government, had to assemble ship and distribute over 27 million standardized food parcels to POWs worldwide. Each parcel had to be nutritionally balanced, non-perishable for years, and culturally tailored, a masterpiece of packaging and procurement. But creation was only the first step. The real nightmare was distribution. Parcels shipped from the U.S. had to reach neutral Swiss warehouses. then be loaded onto sealed Red Cross trains for passage into the Reich. ICRC delegates filed frantic reports describing a collapsing system. Distribution is the constant crisis. Rail lines are cut by bombing. German military and civilian authorities commandeer rolling stock. Theft from wagons is endemic. Each parcel that arrives is a minor miracle. The stakes were mortal. For the prisoner, a parcel meant the difference between life and a slow, degrading death from malnutrition. For the U.S., it was a solemn obligation under the Geneva Convention and a powerful symbol of national resolve, proof that America would move mountains, not abandon its men. Initial skepticism was rampant. German authorities saw the effort as naive, logistically absurd American sentimentality. Even some prisoners doubted the parcels could reliably penetrate the Reich's increasing chaos. They were about to witness the application of the same industrial resolve that built liberty ships and field armies, but directed toward an act of sustained, organized compassion. But packing lists and procurement contracts show the contents of these parcels were not random. They were a scientifically designed morale-targeting weapon system. The white box was a masterpiece of scientific and psychological engineering. The official American Red Cross packing list reads like a targeted survival kit. For protein, a tin of Spam, corned beef, or salmon. For carbohydrates, hardtack biscuits, a box of Kellogg's cereal and dried prunes. For fat, a tin of butter or cheese. For critical vitamins and minerals, powdered milk and dried eggs. But the true genius lay in the morale components. Genuine roast coffee, real sugar, a chocolate debar, and packs of cigarettes. This was not just food. It was a carefully calibrated instrument. Nutritionally, it was designed as a complete supplement to the starvation German diet, delivering over 4,500 calories and 100% of daily vitamin requirements to reverse emaciation. Psychologically, it was a weapon against despair. The coffee and chocolate were sensorial time machines, offering a fleeting taste of pre-war normalcy. Economically, it was a system starter. Cigarettes became the universal Lagergeld, a stable camp currency for trading and procuring extra food or favors, fostering a microeconomy that restored agency. The sturdy tins themselves were repurposed as cups, stoves, and tools. ARC officials stated the design philosophy was dual purpose: to arrest physical decline with dense nutrition and to arrest moral decline by providing a tangible link to home. The innovation extended to packaging, state-of-the-art canning, hermetic sealing, and durable cardboard, ensuring contents survived a transatlantic voyage in months in storage. This was the arsenal of democracy applied not to destruction, but to sustenance. Every can of Spam, every gram of coffee, represented a logistical triumph and a conscious choice to value the life and spirit of a captured soldier. It was systematic compassion, industrialized. The German system offered neglect and theft. The American response was a box of meticulously curated hope. As the first trains of these targeted sustenance weapons crossed into Germany in late 1944, secret camp diaries and guard reports document a looming confrontation between two realities. The arrival of parcels was a moment of fraught, electric tension. A siren or shout would echo through the frozen camp, Paquette. Emaciated prisoners formed silent, anxious lines. The Red Cross boxes, often battered from their harrowing journey, were counted under the hungry gaze of German guards and the watchful eyes of the prisoner's own elected man of confidence, who ensured a brutally fair division. Memoirs describe the scene in stark terms: a lottery of survival. The guards, many of whom were themselves underfed older men or boys, watched with a mixture of official contempt and raw, poorly concealed avarice. ICRC reports repeatedly documented systematic pilferage by camp personnel before distribution. Cigarettes, chocolate, and coffee were prime targets. A prisoner at Stalag 17B wrote of the agonizing ritual. They sometimes slit a box open. Take the cigarettes or chocolate and shrug. You took what was left, your heart pounding. Wondering if the miracle was inside or already stolen? The unopened white box, sitting on a wooden table in the Appellplatz, became a supreme symbol of the war's imbalance. It represented a world of order and abundance that seemed a fairy tale against the grim reality of the camp's hunger, cold, and German scorn. For the prisoners, it held the potential for physical salvation and a psychological blow against their captors. For the guards, it was a taunting artifact of an enemy's obscene wealth, a luxury they were ordered to deny themselves but were powerless to resist. The air crackled with a silent collective question: would this box contain disappointment, or would it deliver on the impossible promise etched in its red cross? Then, the boxes were opened, and according to multiple first-hand accounts, the contents did something no propaganda ever could. The climax was sensory and psychological. The rip of cardboard, the hiss of vacuum-sealed tins popping open. Then, the smells: real roast coffee, sweet milk chocolate, the salty fatty temps of Spam. Flooded barracks that had known only the odor of decay and turnips. Memoirs describe a collective intake of breath, then a silence of profound awe. Some men wept openly. Others laughed in hysterical relief. The food was shared with ritual care, a sacrament of survival that restored not just calories, but identity and a tangible connection to a functioning home. The guards' reactions were the true litmus test. Their initial scorn curdled into stunned, silent envy. For prisoners, the economic reversal was instantaneous and profound. Cigarettes became Lagergeld, the camp's hard currency. A guard's monthly Wehrmacht pay could be eclipsed by the value of a single Parcels cigarette ration. Suddenly, the captors were economically subordinate to their captives. Guards began offering extra bread, passes, or favors in exchange for chocolate, coffee, or camels. The barbed wire still stood, but the power dynamic inside had inverted. The parcel was an irrefutable data point that obliterated Nazi propaganda. It proved the Allies were not collapsing, but were, in fact, so productively dominant they could mount a precision humanitarian campaign for their captured men while simultaneously reducing Germany to rubble. Morale among prisoners transformed from desperate endurance to defiant hope. ICRC medical reports provided cold clinical proof in camps receiving regular parcels. The catastrophic weight loss stabilized and deficiency diseases dropped by over 30% compared to isolated camps. The box was a lifeline that physically and spiritually pulled men back from the brink. The German system, built on deprivation and ideological contempt, had been defeated inside its own fences by a superior system of organized compassion and overwhelming abundance. In the space of an hour, the camp hierarchy was rewritten, and as the last parcels were distributed in the chaotic spring of 1945, intelligence reports and liberators' accounts documented the final, devastating impact. By the spring of 1945, the inversion was total. As the Reich imploded, the last vestiges of guard authority evaporated, replaced by a crude barter economy where prisoners held all the capital. U.S. Army Liberation reports. Detail guards trading rifles, ammunition, and even camp vehicle keys for cigarettes and chocolate. The German war machine, which had sought to break men through systematic deprivation, was itself broken by the evidence of a system that valued its soldiers' lives enough to sustain them in captivity. The parcels became the ultimate instrument of resilience. Their contents, especially the dense, caloric tinned meat and fats, provided a vital, portable reserve during the horrific forced marches as the Germans evacuated camps ahead of Allied advances. Men who had hoarded Spam and D-bars survived. The luxury items were now literal lifesavers, carried in sacks alongside meager personal belongings. Parcels also fortified prisoners' solidarity. Stronger men used their parcel reserves to support the sick and weak. Maintaining a crucial chain of mutual aid that Nazi ideology had predicted was impossible among individualistic democracies. In a supreme irony, German camp commanders and some offlogs formally protested to the protecting power that the parcels were demoralizing for their own troops, who had to witness this daily display of enemy abundance while their own families starved. The psychological defeat was complete. The captors, who held the physical power of life and death, had been reduced to supplicants in an economy defined by the very luxuries they despised. The boxers from America had not only sustained bodies, but had corroded the last remnants of the captors. Ideological certainty and command authority from within. The immediate victory was the survival of thousands of men. But Red Cross archives and post-war analyses show the impact of these parcels resonated far beyond the wire, shaping the very meaning of the Allied victory. The immediate impact was written on the bodies of liberated men. U.S. Army medical teams entering camps in April and May. 1945 found a stark, documented divide. Prisoners from camps like Stalag Luft III with regular parcel access suffered from exhaustion and moderate malnutrition but were fundamentally sound. Their recovery to repatriation fitness took weeks. In contrast, men from camps like Burga or subcamps, where parcels were systematically denied, were living skeletons, requiring months of intensive, often futile medical care. The parcels had been the difference between survival and a slow death sentence. This deliberate deprivation became a matter of international justice. The systematic diversion and theft of Red Cross parcels by German authorities was meticulously documented in ICRC protest notes, which were entered as evidence at the Nuremberg trials. Prosecutors cited the theft of life-sustaining aid as a clear war crime, illustrating the Wehrmacht High Command's criminal neglect of its obligations under the Geneva Convention. Symbolically, the empty parcel boxes themselves became powerful icons. Liberating troops, like those at Stalag Savona, found stacks of carefully saved white boxes with red crosses in barracks. Physical proof of the thin thread of hope that had sustained men through years of captivity. This imagery, broadcast in newsreels and magazines, shaped the American public's understanding of the POW ordeal, transforming abstract prisoners into resilient individuals who had been supported by the tangible might of home. The parcel system thus served a triple function. It was a life-saving supply line, a damning document of enemy criminality, and a unifying symbol of national commitment. Historians now document that this chapter did more than keep men alive. It fundamentally defined the ethical chasm between the Allied and Axis war efforts. This episode occupies a unique place in the history of total war. Amidst a conflict defined by strategic bombing and genocide, the Red Cross parcel program stood as a monumental, successful commitment to the restraining principles of international law. It proved that neutral humanitarian aid could operate within and even exploit the cracks of a crumbling totalitarian state. Its legacy is threefold. First, in law, the documented German obstruction and theft of parcels provided a powerful case study that directly shaped the strengthened provisions for relief. Shipments in the 1949 Geneva Conventions, turning the World War II practice into binding international statute. Second, in logistics, the program's vast standardized supply chain, sourcing, packing, shipping, and distributing millions of identical units across global battlefields, became the foundational blueprint for all modern humanitarian relief operations, from UN refugee aid to NGO disaster response. Third, in memory, the white box with the Red Cross became an indelible American icon. It symbolized the nation's logistical genius applied to a moral purpose and the deeply held creed of leaving no man behind. It reassured the home front that captured sons and husbands were not forgotten, while simultaneously demonstrating to the world a form of power expressed through generosity, not just force. As historian Vasilis Forkausiotis notes, the parcels fought on a non-violent front, sustaining Allied morale and systematically degrading the enemy's moral and ideological standing from within their own camps. The program defined an ethical chasm. The Allied legacy was one of structured, lawful compassion, an industrial-scale effort to uphold human dignity. The Axis legacy, cemented at Nuremberg, was one of systematic deprivation and criminal neglect. The parcel was more than sustenance. It was the physical embodiment of a fundamental choice about what kind of civilization was worth fighting for. What is the ultimate documented lesson from this story of white boxes in a black time? The ultimate lesson is that power is multifaceted. Final victory is measured not only by whose army stands, but by whose civilization stands for its values when tested. The Red Cross parcels proved American power was not merely destructive, though its bombers were laying waste to the Reich, but profoundly, creatively life-sustaining. It was a victory of organized care over systematic cruelty. The Nazis derided the luxury in the boxes, a fatal misreading. They failed to understand that the ability to produce such quality at scale and deliver it reliably to the world's darkest corners, even to one's captured sons, was the definitive metric of a superior system. This episode sits at the heart of the American World War II mythos, the arsenal of democracy transforming. In its moment of ultimate strength, into the commissary of hope, the scale remains staggering. By war's end, the American Red Cross had shipped over 27 million standard food parcels. Each one was not just a collection of rations, but a meticulously crafted argument against despair, delivered by hand to the doorstep of tyranny. This story is packed into old cardboard boxes and archives. If you want to discover more untold stories of how humanity itself became a weapon in World War II, subscribe. We unpack history's most powerful deliveries. Next time, we'll reveal an even more unexpected delivery system, the cargo glider. The story of how silent, engineless aircraft delivered everything from jeeps to howitzers behind enemy lines is one of the war's greatest forgotten gambles. Military history proves, never underestimate a nation that fights a war not just with armies, but with care packages and wins both.